Well, Nabil Habiby, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm so excited about our conversation.
Thank you, Faris, for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I appreciate this opportunity.
So, Nabil, you're from Lebanon, you're from Beirut, and you are a gifted young man. I admire your work and the way that you are engaging in conversation, especially in social media and among young people, asking questions and discussing matters of faith, culture, and current events in the Arab world. And I really think and believe that God has given you a prophetic voice, but that prophetic voice is also it's measured, it's principles, and most importantly, it's gospel centered and Christ centered. And before we take a deep dive in our questions today, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and about your ministry you've been leading in Lebanon?
Thank you, Faris, for this introduction. I hope I can live up to the expectations. So I grew up in the local church, in the evangelical church in Beirut. I've been serving in different aspects of ministry ever since I was young. It started off me being a youth worker. I still do that on the side. But then back in 2014, when I began to do my MA in Biblical Studies, I decided to start a blog. This was my first engagement with the notion of putting my ideas out there. So it was I would post the WordPress blog on Facebook and then on my own blog spot. And I've been blogging consistently since then. And I remember I engaged in hot topic issues. I've always thought that we need to engage in real theology for real people, and that our theology should make sense for the Muslim, for the skeptic, for the seeker, not just for the Christian.
So tell us a little bit about your family and your background there.
Yes, I grew up in Beirut. Both my parents are originally from Palestine, but we were lucky enough for my father to get a Lebanese passport, although the value of that passport is quickly receding in value. And my mother is also Palestinian, but she was also born as a Jordanian. And right now I'm married to a beautiful young lady. She serves in different aspects. She does theater and podcasting and other stuff. And I have two young boys. And I'm engaged very much in the local church and ministry and teaching ministry and with youth, young adults, and also engaged online with people who are either Christians or are seeking to know Christ more.
So you're engaging in these cultural issues and cultural topics and current events in the Middle East, and how is that impacting the work of the gospel in Lebanon? What is the reception like among young people and among the greater community, whether it's the Muslim or Christian community? How are people receiving your message and your ministry?
There are different parts of society in Lebanon, as other societies, I guess. So in the leftist political sphere, when I engage, it's refreshing for them to see a religious person engaging in the leftist secularized political realm and actually being able to engage without forcing my religion on others. So I think my presence there is usually accepted with welcoming arms, which I'm lucky for. Now, in the local evangelical world, I think some people appreciate my voice. Other people find my voice to be rather too challenging or too nasty. I don't know. So basically, my theory is I believe that vibrant, honest theological debate is good for the church. It's not bad for the church. I take this from my Wesleyan heritage, where we are able to do theology publicly without hating each other. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think it's quite helpful and healthy for society to see Christians arguing without attacking each other, which is my main issue with Zionist Christians. As you well know, that they attack our character rather than attack our arguments. And I think this is the issue. Like, attack my argument all you want. Let's have a vibrant theological debate. But we're still part of one big church family in some way or another. So I think different parts of society receive me differently. I guess I do what I do not for the likes or the lack of them. I do what I do because I believe that I have a fire in me that says something has to be said about this, and I just say it. I sometimes regret it. I sometimes don't regret it, but I just say what I need to say.
So Lebanon is in the heart of the Middle East, and it's a country with such, rich history, rich biblical history as well, and rich diversity. And I think, many people don't know how diverse Lebanon is. Yet it has been through immense turmoil in recent years. And despite those challenges, uh, I believe God is at work in the midst of it all. I know so many pastors and incredible churches and ministries doing fantastic job and fantastic work in sharing God's love and making disciples. And it truly refreshes my heart when I hear the incredible reports about how God is moving and how the church is advancing in Lebanon. Can you give us a quick overview of Lebanon today and what you're seeing God is doing in the midst of these struggles?
Yeah, Lebanon is quite a complex political nation state. So it's very religiously diverse, and it sits right in the middle of this meeting place of East and West, to use a rather archaic metaphor, but it still exists in some way. And so it's quite diverse. You have a very strong Catholic Maronite presence, which is a local Catholic sect, an Eastern Catholic sect. It joined the Catholic Church after the Crusades. And then you have a vibrant evangelical presence, and you have an Orthodox presence, and you have a big Sunni and Shia presence. So it's quite diverse, and other small subgroups. Our political landscape is quite sectarian, which I find issue with.
How many Christians are there in Lebanon right now? What's the percentage compared to other sects?
That's a tricky question. We haven't done a census in a long time. I would expect it to be anywhere between 30 to 40%. But again,
it used to be much higher.
Yeah, I mean, so in Lebanon's case, not like I think Syria, Iraq, other parts, it's clearly the Christian population has just plummeted completely. In Lebanon, it's a bit different. And I mean, ever since the formation of Big Lebanon, 1920, we've never been a clear majority as Christians. And I would even say that I find this focus on numbers rather problematic, because one, you have many people who are Christian or Muslim by, in our, you know this very well, in our area of the world, you're born with a religion. Many of the people who do not practice that religion do not actually believe in it, but they're part of the census. And then you have many people who have changed their religious affiliation this way or that way, either like between Christian sects, or from Christianity to Islam, or from Islam to Christianity, and they haven't changed their official papers. So it's very hard. I don't personally judge by the numbers, but yeah, generally speaking, the Christian population is slowly dwindling in Lebanon. I think that could be a fair assessment of the official numbers.
Yeah. Lebanon is a beautiful country. They call it the Switzerland of the Middle East. Beautiful mountains, beautiful sea, beautiful people, amazing cuisine. I love Lebanese food. Lebanese people are just amazing too. And I wanted to spend a little more time talking about, the war and how it has impacted Lebanon in many different ways. Give me your take on just the recent events quickly. How is that shaping Lebanon today?
Yeah, I think Lebanon has been in a tug of war in terms of, will Lebanon belong to the American hegemony, to the American imperial structure, or will Lebanon belong to the Iranian sphere? And we've been in the middle of the tug of war, I think, probably since the formation of Hezbollah, perhaps, I don't know. But we've been in this consistent conflicts happening. And quite recently, a year and 4 months ago, we were part of a long conflict that started in Gaza and swept across Lebanon. And then with the Iranian and Israeli conflict right now, it's also part of this cycle of conflict. And it's taking the toll on Lebanon's economy. We already had an economy that was basically that went into free fall around 5-6 years ago. Actually, I would say 7 years ago. And then with the war and the displacement of more than 1 million people, and we already were housing many displaced Syrians, but now we're in this very tricky position right now with Hezbollah's power waning, but then the regime in Syria isn't very friendly to Christians or to Shias. It's rather a Sunni extremist uh, uh, um, regime, and Israel is getting the upper hand in Lebanese politics. So I envision a change in the map itself. I think we're in very chaotic times politically. I envision that 10, 15 years later, even the map will not look the same. I doubt if it will
Yeah.
remain the same colonial map that was drawn in 1920.
Even with this ongoing war, I mean, it's a regional war right now, full blown war across the Middle East, particularly in Iran. Right now, we see how war affects everyone in the region, but it also especially affects Christians. Government make their decisions to go to war, and they present their legal or their political case for why they should or should not go to war. But recently, some leaders have even tried to make a biblical case for the war in the Middle East, right? And this is where we need to stand up and say, no, not in our name. As Christians, we are called to advocate for peace, not for war. Jesus never called for war, never endorsed war. Even when he lived in a time of high tensions with many groups calling for uprisings against the Roman Empire. But sometimes Christians lose sight, not just people in the Middle East. I mean, in the Middle East, we are in the middle of this, but people outside, thousands of miles away, they have strong opinions about the people in the Middle East, and we lose sight of what this means, and we miss the heart of Jesus. We are called to be peacemakers, first and foremost, not advocates of war. But I completely also understand, Nabil, that there is evil in this world, right? And some groups and some governments seek death and destruction. And it's not just one side. There's so many different groups that advocate for violence. There are many different groups and regimes in the Middle East that promote violence against innocents. But our answer as Christians must never be war. Christians can serve in the government, they can serve in the militaries, but we can never justify our political decisions biblically. The church is not a platform to promote policy or political direction, right? The church is there in the Middle East to minister, to help the suffering, to embrace the outcast and the marginalized, to all people, to promote God's agenda on earth. Pastors are called to pastoral ministry, not to a political ministry. But sometimes that involves raising a prophetic voice, like you do many of the times, in the face of injustice. But the Bible never, ever should be ever used to justify war or political action. So my concern, though it's the millions of innocent civilians who will be impacted by this war in Iran. And more specifically, I'm concerned about the impact on Christian community. How do you see the impact of war on Christians in Lebanon today?
Thank you, Faris. There's quite a lot to unpack here. Also, in your statement itself, I don't necessarily agree completely with you. I think that, which is always fun. I think that so it's. I think one of the, so Christians have questions. I think we operate out of questions, and we have a specific answer for that question. So that's how we operate in the world. One of the questions is what's the biggest threat against Christianity in the Middle East? And I think many Christians have chosen to answer by saying it's Islam. Now, that might be true at some level. Christians have faced persecution recently, in recent years, in different parts of the Arab world, but not in all parts. And I think that
by extremist groups.
Yes, but I think there's this feeling. So there's this lack of trust in the neighbor, because I think, and I think it's part of a wider problem in the Arab world that hasn't just affected Christians. It's a problem where, beginning in the 1970s, we've moved from post-colonialism, we moved to authoritarian structures in all parts of the Arab world, and then post-authoritarian structures, when they have fallen down, it has been Islamic regimes propping up, and then Christians feel that we either have to choose between an authoritarian leader who is against freedom, to just use this word as is, and between an Islamic regime that will force Islamic Sharia on us. and they many times have chosen to side with the authoritarian regime, like what happened in Syria with Bashar al-Assad. Christians, by and large, were saying he's good to us. It's happening right now with Jordan. Christians love the king because he keeps Sunni extremists at bay. So we feel as Christians that we're under attack from our neighbors, and I would agree with that. It's not necessarily true. Many of our neighbors don't want to attack us. Many of our Muslim neighbors are good neighbors, and then those same extremist groups would also attack regular Muslim people. But there's this deep feeling of frustration from local Christian communities, and what's happening is Israel comes in and says, we will protect you, and then as we topple this Iranian regime, as we topple Hamas in Gaza, as we do this and that, the world will be a better place for Christians. And I don't think that's necessarily true. One, because we have no evidence that pre-Israel Christians were doing really that bad. One. Two, as we tie ourselves closely with the genocidal regime in Israel, we tie the gospel with that regime. And once the tide turns, as it will eventually in some place around the world, especially in the US, and once the tide turns against Israel, the gospel will be swept along in the fray. And I think we're playing a very dangerous game when we choose to engage in politics in this way. So I'm not calling for a disengagement from politics, but I'm calling for a healthy engagement with politics. And I believe Christians being a minority.
I want to know.
Yes.
I want to know the impact of like, let's say, example, the war in Iran right now. What is the impact on Christians? As a result of this war.
So there's this consistent general impact on all people, is that people are always seeking to leave the Middle East, and especially Christians, because Christians find it easier to go towards Europe and the US because they feel perhaps at home there because of cultural similarities in terms of religion. So there's this huge ongoing migration from Iraq and other parts, from Syria, from Lebanon, all the way to the West. And entire families and towns have just left to Australia or to the US or Canada. So this war will just add to this feeling that Christians have that this is not a good place to live. But I think all people have that feeling in the Middle East, but particularly Christians, because when as you know very well, when war happens, minority groups tend to be hit the hardest in that war. So I think war in general is not healthy for Christians and for other people groups in the Middle East. And there's this feeling
Iraq
that we need to just get
Syria,
out of here. It's not a friendly place to live.
Right. That's what Christians do all the time during conflict. They just tend to flee. Like Iraq, Syria, and Gaza, the church has been buried by the devastation of war. In Iraq, we've gone from 1.5 million Christians before the war to around now 150,000.
Yeah, I was reading
In
a book by
Syria, the numbers.
Yeah, I was reading a book by a good friend. He's a researcher, Bashar Rahmi. He wrote about Christians in Syria, and he estimates the number to be 200,000 in Syria right now, which is mad.
How many?
Recently, 200,000. I recently,
Wow. And they've dropped from 2 million.
yeah, and I floated that number by Pastor Joseph Qassab, who's the head of the Evangelical Synod. He's like, no, I think it's 400,000, which is still really bad. But so we're looking at a drop from 2 million to 250,000 at best, and those who are still there are afraid to stay there. So we have failed to create a post-colonial Middle East that makes sense for people and that makes sense for Christians, except maybe in two pockets, like in the Lebanese mountain and in parts of Egypt. But other than those two pockets of staunch Christian presence, we failed to create a safe space for people groups to exist together in a pluralistic, secular society.
So many Christians and many Syrian refugees, there was a huge influx of refugees into Lebanon after the revolution in 2011. Many of them also fled to Turkey. Many of them even drowned in the sea trying to get to Europe. But so many of them ended up in Lebanon. And I'm sure you have interacted with many Syrian Christians who fled Syria and came to Lebanon. What has been their experience like?
It was quite a journey for the Lebanese church, because in the Lebanese civil war, Syria first entered the fray with the Christian militias, and then they later became against them. And then from 1990 till 2005, we were occupied by Syrian forces, and the Christian community saw itself as the target of that occupation. So fast forward 2011, and Syrians start to come in, and Lebanon is quite polarized in terms of where people live. So you have Christian areas and Muslim areas, Sunni areas, Shia areas, and then all these Syrians would come in. Most of them are Muslim, and they would rent houses in Christian areas, especially around Beirut and on the coast. There were some refugee camps in the Bekaa Valley, but by and large there weren't any camps. People just lived anywhere. So for a period of more than 12, 13 years, we had to interact with this extreme other. They're Syrians, and the Christians don't like the Syrians in Lebanon, and then they're Muslim. So there's a cultural, religious differences and historical enmity. And I think it was a good journey for the church to take, to wake up and realize that right now half our audience and our congregations and our leadership are Syrian. And I think it has changed us in ways that we will never recover, and that's a good thing for us. In small and big ways, we've just gotten used to having a church that's full of Syrians and Lebanese right now. And personally, I love that. And many Syrians who came in had a chance to interact with Christianity in a new way, and some chose to follow Christ, others not. And I think this was good for the church to learn how to be more open to our neighbors. Yeah.
Great, yes. The Christian presence, as you mentioned, has been in decline for decades. Many are leaving to many different reasons, right? Low birth rates also contribute to that. People immigrating for better lives in the West. However, there is an interesting academic study. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, conducted by our friends Scott Gustafson. And I'll add a link to this study in the description of the video. But this study highlights a largely underreported wave of conversion to Christianity
Yeah,
among people
I
from Muslim
heard
backgrounds.
that study. Yeah. I read through
Yeah.
that study.
So
My issue
although
is,
there's people,
yeah, I think if it's the same study I have in mind, I'm not sure about their sampling. I mean, I don't think we have any way of knowing. Two things. One is encouraging, one is discouraging. We have no way of knowing how many Christians are actually Christian still, and not like closet atheists. Because I believe in working with atheists in Lebanon, there's a vast number of closet atheists in our community. And once the tide turns against religion being in vogue, and it being cool to be Christian or Muslim, they will appear. Two, we have no way of knowing how many people are meeting Christ via social media tracks and TV programs and local church work and just the spread of the gospel. And I think there's lots of evidence to show that many people are choosing to know and follow Christ. But there's also evidence of Christians moving to Islam at some level here and there, especially also in the West. So yes, I think that I've seen in my own ministry many Muslims come to faith, and there seems to be a realization that the way of Christ is a healthy and righteous way of living in this world.
Despite these, conversion rates that are reported in that study, and I hope that people go check it out, yet at the same time, young people and young Christian families are still leaving the Middle East in significant numbers. I don't know if you see that in Lebanon as much. I believe war is a major factor, but there is more than just demographic shifts. I mean, the real issue is that many young Christians that we serve in our ministry are leaving in search of stability, opportunity elsewhere, and this creates a generational gap in the church. So this exodus isn't just about numbers, it's about the very survival of the church. I don't know if you see it that way.
I used to. I don't anymore. I think that. So I don't want to say, just leave, that's fine. I do believe that people do what's best for their families, I've grown less ideological about a movement of people in general. I've grown to hate more and more borders and passports and this whole world order of nation states. And as I recently read through the work of Mikhail Naimi, a very an old famous Lebanese writer, 1990s, early 1900s, and he never saw his dad. His dad was in Argentina or the US or something. And so this has been going on for more than 200 years. We have a huge Lebanese population in Brazil, more than the Lebanese living in Lebanon. And you have generations after generations of just people living there. And I think that Lebanon's presence on the coast has always been this people group, city-states of ebb and flow of commerce on the sea and just traveling and forming colonies everywhere. So we're very much a people that consistently choose to travel. Now, I do think that the local church is suffering from lack of ministers and leaders and people, because many people are well trained, well educated, and full of the Spirit, and then they just leave. But I think that they are a blessing to where they go to Dubai, to the US. So I've shied away recently from shaming language. I think people do what's best for their families, and I know that I would love to leave, but I don't leave because I have a calling to stay. If you don't have a calling to stay,
Does that put a burden in your heart? Does that move you as a young minister, that you want to equip more people, empower more people, do more ministry?
of course. But if I wake up tomorrow and I have a youth group of 25, 30 people, or I interact with, and then they choose to leave, some of them, I would be rather frustrated, because we need local leaders. But at the same time, I understand that people migrate towards the center of the empire to find a better life. If you have a calling, you stay. If you don't have a calling, life outside is better at some level, and maybe not at other levels. Some people have left and then came back saying it's terrible to live in Europe. No one says hi to you. I mean, it's. I want to shy away from.
It's
I
always
don't wanna
greener on
blame
the other
people for.
side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to blame people for their choices, for their life choices. I have no right to do that. What I would say is that the local church is suffering from a lack of qualified leaders and ministers and servants in the kingdom.
So, despite these overwhelming challenges in Lebanon, political challenges, violence, people are leaving, people are staying, economic challenges for sure, I believe there are still rays of hope. I believe the resilience of the church, the resilience of people like you who decide to stay, the deep faith of Christians and leaders who decide to minister despite all these challenges they're going through. The work of ministries like yours are still shining lights in dark time. And I'm often reminded of the words of Jesus, when he said in John, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So, Nabil, what gives you hope in Lebanon, especially when the challenges seem so huge?
My hope resides in the first of all, in the basic Christian hope that which happened to the body of Christ will happen to this creation, including my people and all people groups. And my other hope is that as I be present here as a Christian presence, and I believe in a theology of presence, and as I minister to people and raise up a generation of people who have spiritual hunger for the Spirit and for the gospel and for the word of God, that I am doing the work of the kingdom. And my utmost loyalty is to the
Yes.
kingdom and not to a certain nation state. I don't have very strong feelings for my country per se. I love the people here. And as I minister to young adults who are both skeptics and Christians, I find great joy in those relationships. And I feel that if I leave, I'm in a sense leaving behind my children, and that's not an easy decision to make. And I believe I find hope in the work of the Spirit that is happening through me and despite me and around me. And the Spirit, I don't know, in English it says that the Spirit will blow as she wishes. I mean, I don't choose,
Mm,
but the God is at work here and everywhere, and I
yes,
find hope in that the Spirit is at work.
that's amazing. If you were speaking at a church in the U.S. That has influence and
I would never get a
people
visa,
with
Paris. They can just check my Facebook. The current regime would never give me a
okay,
visa.
let's say you get on Zoom with a church in the U.S. What would your message be?
Oof, I mean, I would as an observer of American politics and the American theological landscape, as an ardent observer, too much so. I don't know why I have a love for the American reality show that is America. I would definitely I think I would preach about what I started early on in this podcast about the necessity of regaining the gift of disagreeing in love, and the theological basis of our shared identity is found in Christ and not in our theological beliefs. Because I think the American evangelical church has very much come down on you have to believe these certain things about these certain issues to be a good Christian, and I find that highly problematic.
To belong.
Yes, I think we belong in Christ, and then we are free to explore ideas without demonizing the other. And I feel the church in the US, just like the political landscape, is highly polarized in a rather startling way, and I think that is very, very problematic.
I guess my question is how can Christians around the world and in the US can stand in solidarity with the Lebanese Christians who are on the front lines serving day in day out and being salt and light to the world around them? How can they be a real support in such troubled times?
That's a good question. I think that the church is doing that in some way. We always feel we're part of a big network of churches around the world. And I know from my own Nazarene network and then from other friends, pastors around the world and friends, we're always in contact. I think that if the church seeks to do something, I would encourage them to seek to raise local leaders. In Lebanon, the economic situation is very hard. So for people to serve, to go into full-time ministry, that's quite, people have to work 2 jobs just to raise a family. So if the church can focus on funding local leaders, people who say, you know what, I'm ready to do ministry, and they'll say, okay, we'll support you on that, because many times support comes in for projects and resources, which is great, but really our biggest asset is young committed leaders or old leaders who care for the gospel, who are well trained theologically, and who want to engage with people. And I think this is the biggest challenge here, and I think all around the world. And I again, I do want to stress that I feel very much the love of different churches around the world, and I feel we're part of this big network. And I think our voice is heard more or less, and people do ask us our opinion as is happening right now. And I appreciate that very, very deeply.
Absolutely. Invest in the next generation. They're the hope of the future. They're the hope of the Middle East, and they're the hope of Lebanon. So, Nabil, thank you so much for this great conversation, sharing your insights and wisdom with us today. It's clear that while there are many challenges facing Lebanon today and the ministry there, the church is still standing strong in Lebanon and the broader Middle East. There are still people like you living testimonies and sharing the hope and love of Jesus with your neighbors in every chance and every opportunity you get. So as we close, let's remember to remember our brothers and sisters, our extended family in the Middle East. And sometimes it's that body that church is hurting and it's bleeding sometimes, but we need to remember them in prayer, in supporting them, and standing in solidarity, and helping them raise the next generation of leaders. And so they can become peacemakers, so they can love their neighbors and show the love of Jesus in real and tangible way, extending the radical love of Christ to all people, even in the most difficult times. Nabil Habiby, thank you again.
Thank
It's
you, Faris.
always good to talk to you, my friend.
It was a good chat with you. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.